Hi guys, welcome back to our fourth ASU Talk. We see each other for the first time in 2021. So on behalf of the whole ASU team, we wish you very pleasant, very successful, and hopefully corona-free 2021. Just also briefly, thanks for the support of our supporters who are Minerva Visuals and Cultural Bridge, who supported us in creating this ASU Talk today. And also, I want to tell you that this year we're not slowing down. We're not slowing down in creating beautiful content for you with our activities, and we are working hard in creating a plan for our upcoming months. So be ready again for even more catchy, eye-opening, moving, but most importantly, intelligent information we're trying to provide you. We believe that the situation will soon allow us to meet you all in person. But before that, we are very happy to meet you here on our Facebook page. You can also meet us on our LinkedIn profile and also on our freshly YouTube channel. So in case you miss our conversation today, don't worry. You can always rewatch it later on our YouTube. And in case you're interested in seeing also other previous conversation we had in months before, you can always find them there. So don't worry, you can always go to our YouTube channel and see everything what we've created so far. While comfortably watching our conversation here, by the way, we are going to be talking about a life in Africa in the eyes of a European with these handsome gentlemen who are with me today. But before I introduce them to you, let me encourage you to contribute to our discussion today. So while you are seated on your chair, on your sofa, wherever you are at, just make a little effort, okay, and make a little move and just type your question, your comment, anything you have at heart. Please share it with us. We'll be very happy to read it out loud and discuss it with our speakers who are with me today. Okay. And one more thing to add to it. You can always find the wrap up of the whole conversation on our page, which is asu.sk. So you can always go there and to find an articles, our upcoming event. All the informations are there for your concern, for your if you're interested, you can always find it there. Okay. As I mentioned, today we're going to be discussing life in Africa through the eyes of a European. And when I say European, I mean these two lovely gentlemen who are with us today. First of them is Donald Green. Hi, Donald.
Hi, Susanna. Thanks for having me.
Okay. And Miroslav Pacak. Ciao, Miro.
Hello. Hello.
So both of them are very much professionally and also privately entangled with Africa. Just to give you a very small introduction to both of them, Donald Green is originally from Ireland, and yet he has been in Slovakia. He has been living in Slovakia for some time. I believe it's about 10 years, right, Donald?
That's right, 10 years now, so pretty much settled in Slovakia.
Okay, yeah, and I know about you that you are working for a Slovak biometric technological company, and recently you co-founded a promising farming project with a multiple community center in Uganda. Now, on the other side, Miro is pretty much a cosmopolitan person. He's working in financial service industry, and Miro is truly a cosmopolitan person in the very sense of the word, because he has been really almost everywhere He has been traveling all around the world, and recently he established himself in Kenya, Nairobi. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, that is correct. I spent some time in London, Frankfurt, in Geneva, mostly Europe, and quite a number of times also in Kenya.
Right. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go to our conversation here. As I mentioned, that we're going to be discussing life in Africa in the eyes of a European. So let's start with Donald. You're working for a company which is having business in Africa and is in close interest in African markets. Could you please tell us a little bit more about that? What is your experience? Which country you have visited?
Yeah, sure. So I joined a company here in Bratislava called Innovatrix. Innovatrix has been around since about 2004, and I joined in 2015. And we focus on developing biometric technology for identity projects. So over the years, Innovatrix has probably delivered identity projects in about 20 African countries. These projects range from things like e-voting or election projects to border control, police and counterterrorism projects, basically anything where biometrics is used to identify people. So in that role, I managed to begin traveling to Africa back in, I think it was March of 2018. I went to Nigeria, to Abuja. That was my first trip to Africa. And since then, I've probably visited, I would say it's between 6 and 10 African countries. And it's a pretty nice spread because I've been to the West Coast, East Coast, around the South, and also in the middle. So you get to see all the different cultures, different traditions that are there, and get a very nice feel for the continent as a whole.
Okay. And could you be more specific when it comes to your experiences? For example, what was your experience in Nigeria?
Yeah, so that was March 2018, as I said, my first ever trip to Africa. I suppose it's very difficult to know what to expect. I think that's the same with pretty much traveling anywhere in the world. You have your expectations on one side, and the reality is always slightly different. But we arrived there. I think honestly, the first thing I noticed about Africa, or about Nigeria in this case, was the food, and I mean very simple food like fruit and vegetable. For me, the fruit and vegetable in Africa, they taste so much better and so much different than the foods we have or are used to eating here in Europe. I think they're produced in a much more natural way, and even things like the pineapples you get there are like 3 times the size of normal pineapples. So that was like the first impression I had of Nigeria. Abuja itself is a very, let's say, business and government focused city. It's one of only a few capitals in the world which is a purpose-built capital city. So it's probably not the best place to go if you want to experience like the real Nigeria. It's probably more focused around Lagos. But we went there for an event called ID for Africa, and ID for Africa is an event that started in 2014, and they're not NGO basically. And their goal is to ensure a legal identity for all Africans by 2030. So they're addressing the problem of identity. There are 500 million Africans in the world at the moment with no legal identity. And what that does is that precludes them from financial participation or participation in social systems or getting government benefits and these kind of things. And two out of 3 kids in Africa are born without a birth certificate. So we were there as part of that movement. It's a very big city, Abuja, lots of traffic and lots of stuff happening, but it's a very interesting place. We had a very nice time at the conference, and one maybe slightly more negative experience was that actually while we were staying in Abuja in our hotel, we didn't know about it at the time, but there was actually like a terrorist attack that happened there. So we'd arrived. It was on the second day. Everything was going well. And we woke up in the morning and saw that half of the hotel was like cordoned off, and we didn't know what happened. But we found out that there'd been some sort of attack there. So that was, I guess, a mixed experience the first time in Africa. But then having traveled around to all the different places I've been, I have to say that the experience has been overwhelmingly positive.
Mm-hmm. Luckily, you were not directly involved in that attack, so nothing happened to you. Let me go back to the project or the ID conference, as you mentioned, which started, or the whole project started in 2014. Is there any progress? And if so, could you elaborate on it a little?
Yeah, there certainly has been progress, I think, since the project started. And of course, this isn't the only initiative which is focusing on developing reliable identity systems in Africa. I'm not sure of the exact numbers of how many people have been included into these things in the last number of years, but for sure, from working in that market, pretty much all of the countries in Africa I can think of in the last couple of years have begun putting together identity systems, and that starts from making sure that children are properly registered at birth, that they receive a birth certificate, and then that when they reach the age of sometimes 15 or sometimes 18, that they're enrolled into an identity system, that they get an ID card, that they can apply for a passport. And that has a big impact on especially poorer and rural communities. It means that those people can prove their identity without even having a document sometimes, because they can use their fingerprint, or more recently their face, as a biometric password, basically. And then they can access government services and supports that otherwise they wouldn't be able to access. So I think there's been great progress in the last 5 or 6 years in this area, but of course there's a lot left to do. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of these projects that are supported by the World Bank, and other projects are supported by, for example, the Chinese government, the American government, or some European governments, particularly the French and Germans.
All right. When it comes to this project, are we still talking about Nigeria, or also other African countries are involved?
Yeah, so ID for Africa happens in a different African country every year. So the first one I was at was in Nigeria. The second was in South Africa, and unfortunately, the third one that I would have been going to was supposed to be in Morocco, but it was cancelled due to COVID. So we're hoping that this year, at the end of the year, we'll manage to have one. But it's very much a pan-African project. It's not focused on any specific country. Their goal as an NGO is to work with the governments of various countries to understand the individual problems, identity problems that are in these countries, and then to offer solutions by connecting these governments to the people on the market who can actually offer technological solutions to these identity problems.
Right. When it comes to your personal experience, now leaving the professional one aside, what was your experience? What was your experience as a white Western male in interactions with Africans, Miro?
Is that for me or for Miro? Sorry.
Oh, both of you guys. But let's start with Miro this time, okay?
Okay, sorry.
Okay. At least I know my mic works. And sorry, I noticed that my picture keeps moving, but unfortunately I have to use my phone, so it's a bit wobbly. Um,
It's
so
okay. We
I
hope
think
it.
I was kind of, yeah, I just don't want people to get seasick from me moving the camera around too much. Um, So I think I was prepared kind of for Africa, as I experienced African culture already in London through the African community. So I met people from various African countries, and uh, and then um, the the first experience I had was 2011, which was in Nairobi, and it was me living in a very kind of local conditions, I would call it.
Mhm.
I stayed in an SQ, so I rented an SQ, and I stayed for probably 2 months that time. And that's when I first experienced the perceptions that people used to talk about. So um, that that is from anything from you are being a white person, so people perceive you as someone that automatically has a lot of money. So
Mhm.
that's the thing that is happening. But my perceptions of Africa and Africans, I wasn't really surprised. I was feeling kind of free freer than in Europe, because a lot of things were kind of being implemented infrastructure wise and so forth. And The life was different, much more simpler. Yet you could see the extremes, and those extremes were something that kind of got to me quite a lot, because on one end you have the poor communities that are struggling to make living, to make some, little money just to feed their families and themselves. And then on the other hand, like you just go a few kilometers further, and you have big mansions with maids, literally maids in uniforms, and
Mhm.
and a watchman at the door, and basically mentions you're not accustomed to in Europe, unless you go to certain areas which we don't have so many of. So yeah, I think that's about it with the perceptions that I had. But the perceptions right now are very different. I kind of, because also I live here, I am so accustomed. Maybe now some other Europeans would have different perceptions of me as well.
Yeah, might be. Okay, what about you, Donna?
Yeah, I think I agree a lot with what Miro said. I think it very much depends where in Africa you are in relation to the perception of a white European Western male. For example, Miro's now in Nairobi, and I know in the bigger cities, the more international cities in Africa, that it's there's really nothing unusual about seeing a white person there. That it's quite a normal thing, and generally it's perceived as that you're there either doing some business, or you're there working with the UN, or you have some that you may be an expat living there. So I think that's kind of like the standard in these big cities. But then interesting experiences, particularly on my last trip to Uganda, is when you go outside these big cities and you go to the smaller villages, and sometimes you can be the first white person they've ever seen. For example, myself and Martin, your colleague at ASU, we went to some really remote, really rural villages in Uganda. They have a word for white people, Mzungu. It's what they call you there. It's not a derogatory term or anything. It just means white person.
Same, don't know. Same in Kenya. Same
Okay.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mzungu is actually a Swahili word for
Yes.
for us, right?
Yes. Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. And I think it's a curiosity there. So going through these villages, if you happen to stop your car, the local kids, if they happen to be around, they'll kind of come around your car and they'll want to talk to you and want to ask you things, and that's really nice. Really nice experience of being there. There was one experience which was quite interesting, was in South Africa, in Cape Town.
Mhm.
We'd been there on business, then we spent some time in Cape Town, kind of looking around and enjoying the sights and sounds of the place. And we decided then to go to a place called Kailicha, which is an informal township just on the outskirts of Cape Town. It was an eye-opening experience in itself. Like, Kailicha is 2.4 million people, so like half of Slovakia. And I would say the area is maybe comparable to like Petržalka, so it's not a huge area. So you 2.4 million people living in that area. It's 99% black people. It's a very impoverished area in itself. It has a lot of problems. Some of the for those 2.4 million people, they have one hospital serving them and four schools. So that gives you an idea of the area it is. And we went there to meet some local people who are working with another nonprofit or a charity organization. They were local people from the area who had been involved in things like gang violence in the past, and their goal was to work with the local kids and to stop them going down this path and to show them a different way. So it was a community project with these types of goals. And it was probably the first time in my life. We'd spent, I think, 24 hours there. We'd gone around the area, and then they took us to a party, like a proper, like a really big party full of people. And I didn't notice at the beginning, but I turned around and looked around. Once the party got started, there was probably 250 or 300 people there. And I realized that I was literally the only white person in the place. But what I also noticed is that nobody seemed to care at all. It wasn't as if there was something unusual, or they were treating it as something different than normal. So I felt very comfortable. So
Mhm.
maybe to sum it up, I don't think there's any issues about being a white person in Africa. Rather, they actually very much welcome you, and they're usually very happy to see you.
Okay, I can see that we already are gathering some questions from our audiences. First one is from our friend Sakong, who is asking, As a European who, for your own reasons, found yourself in Africa and interacted with Africans, what has changed in your perception and knowledge of Africans and Africa in comparison to what you had known of Africa before spending your time in Africa?
I can have a go at answering if you like first. Well, I think even for me, having been to all the places I've been, it's not a lot. It's maybe 10 countries, but I think the term Africa in itself is very general. When you go to the different countries in Africa, you realize that it's just as diverse, or maybe even more diverse than Europe, if we put that as an umbrella term. Each country has different religion, different ethnic groups of people, different tribes, languages, and all these kind of things. So it's important to understand that if you have an experience in one African country, it's not going to be the same in another country. But I think the one thing that always was visible, no matter where I was, whether it was a predominantly Islamic country or a Christian country or other faiths, Africans have this term of Ubuntu. Which is the feeling of community spirit and the philosophy that the one person is not as important as all the other people. And this is not just a philosophy. This is actually how people live there. It means that they're extremely welcoming, extremely open, friendly, and if you come as a stranger, they're really open and willing to help you.
If I may jump in, this is the very thing our previous speaker was talking about in our previous conversations. So guys, if you want to rewatch it, or for those ones who haven't watched it yet, just go back and rewatch it, because there was a speaker who was herself an African, and she was addressing this community mentality Donna was talking about. So now coming to the question Teresa is asking, as a European who have experienced life in different countries in both Europe and Africa, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions about Africa in general that Europeans have? Very good question. Miro, what do you think?
Okay, we actually talked about this with a recent new friend I met while on vacation in Diani. It's people think that generally a lot of people in Europe think that people in Africa live in huts, that they don't really have any technology, there is no electricity and so forth. Yes, there are challenges. So then you might have blackouts. I mean, the infrastructure is not as developed. However, you have skyscrapers here, you have rooftop restaurants, you have like people have mobile phones, people use internet in all ages. So it's the same as anywhere else in the world. So I think the misconceptions come from just not enough information, and that's partly also us answering Kiboy's question, which was Sakon, right? That I personally didn't have that because I was already accustomed, and I already knew what to expect from having a lot of friends from Africa. But I think this is generally it. I was also noticing there was a family from Czech Republic, also on holiday at the resort in Diani, and I overheard them talking about like, oh wow, this place has good Wi-Fi. I didn't think that we would be able to connect to the world from here. So it's pretty amazing. So yeah, I think that kind of sums it up. There must be a lot of different misconceptions, but I can't think of anything else right now.
All right. And I know about you, Miro, that you've been in Kenya first. You went to Kenya first in 2011, and you moved there very recently. Now you're
Yeah.
establishing your life in there. And has the life in Kenya changed since then?
Yes, it has a lot. Um, and this is solely from my experience. When I was here first in 2011, I was really shocked about this thing called M-Pesa. It's like a digital wallet. So once you have your mobile phone with your number, you register for digital wallet, so people can send you money, you can receive money, you can pay for goods in a market, in a shop, and so forth. And that was something I wasn't expecting in Africa, because it is something we were striving for in Europe, trying to get into the using more of a mobile money systems. Um, Now, that coincidentally is something that was brought to Africa, to Kenya, by Vodafone. It wasn't working for Vodafone in any other countries, any other European countries, because it's very convenient for us Europeans to have access to a bank. On every corner, you have a bank, you have a cash machine, and so forth. Now, they had this plan to introduce microfinance in Kenya to boost up the middle class. And that happened roughly probably 15 to 20 years ago. And in order to boost up the economy, especially in the rural areas, if you want to provide loans to the people so they can kind of better their economic situation and start up businesses and so forth, how do you collect the money if they can't walk 40 kilometers to the nearest bank branch? So that's why it worked for Vodafone, which is the majority of Safaricom, which is I think everybody in Kenya uses Safaricom. Or at least they have the biggest market share in the telecoms. Now, the reason I'm saying all this is I seen the difference from what I seen in 2011 and what I see now. Like literally, the middle class, they have, there is more spending power. That's why you can see that back there were 3 4 clubs that were kind of frequent clubs. Then you had the small local joints where people go, because Kenyans love to party, they love to enjoy life as well as work hard. And uh, right now you can have you literally, you can't visit every single club or an entertainment spot uh, if you wanted to, in the whole of Nairobi. So that just means there is more spending power. People have more money. That means the changes on the economic scale are significant, and it's a good thing. I mean, people can put their kids through better schools. Also, there are programs. Right. Another thing I seen was the Kenyan students that used to come to Slovakia to study in Slovakia, the medicine or anything else they wanted to. It didn't have so many new students as it has now, at least from what I can see. And it's not only that. I see um, a lot of parents can afford to send their kids to school outside of Kenya. That way they gather more experience, get good education, and come back. I'm not saying the education in Kenya is bad, but it's very hard um, to land a job with no experience. So everybody wants an experience. But I think it's not only a problem in Kenya. I think it's a problem worldwide. Like right now, way too many people graduate universities compared to 20, 30, 40 years ago. So that way everybody is fighting for the same jobs now that back in the day you had less people, so the competition was lesser.
But when it comes to communication or the interactions of Kenyans with European countries, we can already see the prime example of Slovak-Kenyan cooperation by seeing these Kenyan students coming in quite big numbers to Slovakia to study here, right? So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I believe the influx has increased over the years. So that might be the
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing or from whatever way you look at it, because the same way they bring their culture and people get to learn about Africa without even leaving Slovakia.
Mhm.
And that's something that happened to me when I was in London, and I made a lot of African friends, because I was always the type that I wanted to experience the culture. I wanted to know what the food is about, how they live, how they party, how they what their customs are, how they spend Christmas, how they uh, uh, what their mentality is, how they deal with problems, and so forth. Because I think it's very specific. It's culturally driven. It's not something you are just born with. A lot of things about us is about the culture we grow up in. That's why we can't even blame for the misconceptions we talked about of people from outside of Africa, the way they see Africa, because it's about what is their source of information, what they know, what they've been exposed to. And this exposure is important. So the same thing is with the school exchange, the same thing is with businesses. So right now, I'm also involved in uh, promoting a medical device for a company that is run by Slovak people. So it's called SCase, and it has a very promising future. And w- it's something that doesn't only work. Basically, companies from Europe don't have to just make money in Europe. They can make money worldwide. And the same thing goes then for companies in Africa. And I see that happening as well. There is a lot of export in services also from Africa. So the same way I'm promoting this device here, the same way Kenya is exporting services. Although a lot of businesses are right now suffering, especially because of the tourism industry is kind of taking quite a hit because of COVID. But yeah, life goes on.
You into it, I would like to tell our audiences and the people who are watching us, please don't forget to type your questions, your comments, or anything you desire to share with us. We'll be very happy to reflect on it with Donald and Miro, who are with me today. And guys, don't be shy, okay? Nothing will happen to you, okay? We don't bite. Right? Okay, so moving on to the next question. Miro, you already started talking about what I wanted to ask you, because to a great surprise of many Slovaks, some African countries are actually in more developed when it comes to technologies, digitalization, infrastructure, and in some occasions even healthcare, right? So could you tell us what the examples of these developments here?
Yeah, I think I touched down on that with the M-Pesa, which is kind of the biggest thing. But it's not really. So I was thinking about it since last time we spoke, and I wouldn't say more developed. I would just say different, because, for instance, the internet speed in Europe and the access to internet is greater than here in Kenya. Um, However, certain services were needed here that are not needed back in Europe, and that had this kind of knock-on effect. And right now, for instance, you want to get an insurance, health insurance, and you are self-employed. You can use your M-Pesa and connected services and pay as much money as you can afford um, into your regular payments to have certain medical health insurance, and it's totally digitalized, and it's to the point that once you activate it, then you can just send your money with SMS without any internet connection. So the living with the mobile technologies is more developed here in these terms, but the infrastructure is not developed more. So that one still has way to go. So for instance, cloud hosting. Cloud hosting is a prime example. Cloud hosting is quite a lucrative business. It has been for a number of years now. However, you need to situate your business where you have the best internet connection, because you can't allow any downtime for your services. So that is something like something that you can find in Europe, in US, in Asia, but you cannot find in Africa because of the infrastructure. But now uh, the M-Pesa is kind of, I think it's something that other African countries are also trying to implement and develop, and they have their own versions of M-Pesa.
I think we're losing you a little bit, or me.
Yes, Ford, because with the with remote areas not being able to access services in a traditional way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so that's pretty much it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Donna, you mentioned massive involvement of China in Africa. Could you
Yeah,
elaborate on
Yeah.
it?
sure. Yeah. Well, first of all, I think Miro definitely hit the nail on the head when he said that it's not necessarily the case that it's more developed from a technological point of view, but I definitely think that they're more open to development and definitely much faster to adopt new technologies as they come in. Maybe here in Europe, there's a little bit of conservatism towards adopting new ways of doing things. For example, a new way of banking remotely, or a new way of voting, and these kind of things. So they're definitely faster to adopt. I've noticed that. We've worked on projects with many African banks where they've been much smoother and much faster at adopting than European banks have. And
Okay.
also, Miro mentioned, and we even saw an example with his data connection, that that is one of the key blockers in Africa. Is that most countries don't have good even 3G, never mind 4G. But that's only a matter of a couple of years till that's solved, and that's going to be another catalyst for a huge amount of development that will happen. Coming back to your question about China, China's one example, and there are probably 3 or 4 major world economies that are focusing now on Africa. Some of it's positive, some of it's infrastructure projects, and there's another side of it that could be maybe interpreted as some sort of modern form of colonization or these kind of things. So there's maybe 2 sides to it. The example that I saw with China, like, we work in the identity business, and China's approach. I can take Rwanda as an example. I've been in Rwanda a couple of times, and we've tried to do some work on government identity projects there. So China's approach in a country like Rwanda is they'll come in with like a stimulus package or an investment package where they'll offer to build like hundreds of kilometers of highway and hospitals and these kind of things. But at the same time, their long-term goal will be to basically gain control of a lot of the country's critical infrastructure. And the idea is that they'll build their influence inside these countries, and that they'll get some economic benefits from this. In Rwanda, you can see examples of that everywhere. China has basically sent thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of its citizens there to settle and to start businesses, which many of them have done successfully. Pretty much any new building of any significance that's going on in Rwanda is Chinese managed. I even had an interesting experience where I was in a hotel in the elevator, and I clicked the button to go to the 5th floor, and the person spoke to me in Chinese, the person in the elevator, the recorded voice. So they're really going in with everything in terms of infrastructure, and trying to have as much influence as possible. And it's not just Rwanda, even huge economies of Africa. One of the biggest is Ghana. And Ghana has it used to be called Gold Coast. So it has a beautiful coastline on the west part of Africa. And pretty much that entire coastline has been either bought, or the management of it has been given over to China. And they plan to build, like boardwalks and theme parks and these kind of things, which are nice. But there's always the second thing behind it, which is that they want to have as much influence as possible in these countries. It's not just China. Russia always has, of course, has significant interest in Africa. The US is battling to have as much influence as it can, and then the European countries like France and Germany are there as well as India. So there's a little bit of an economic battle going on in Africa. The countries themselves are benefiting on one side, but maybe the long term vision is that these countries could have a unfair influence in Africa in general.
Okay, we can already see, based on what you're saying, that the involvement of other countries is tremendous, and yet there are still problems with corruption, political establishment, clientelism, and so on and so forth. Does that affect your professional involvement there, or your professional experience? And if so, to which extent?
Yeah, so in general, well, doing business in Africa is different than doing business in Europe. It's not easier or more difficult. It's just simply different. And for someone like myself going there with not much experience of setting up business there, then of course it presents a challenge. On one side, there are things that are much easier. When Martin and I registered our company recently in Uganda, we were very surprised to see how simple the process was. I've been through the company registration in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, say that again. I didn't catch it.
Yeah, we will talk about it a little later. You will introduce the project in more depth later. But
Yes.
go.
We will, yeah.
I just wanted to.
Yeah, the example I wanted to bring up was registering a company. I've been down that road in Slovakia, and it's quite complicated to register a company in Slovakia. You don't just do it all online and digital signatures and these things. But in Uganda, we could do everything online. We had our papers in a couple of days by email. So this was a nice surprise that we weren't expecting. You mentioned corruption and these kind of things. Of course, they exist. They exist in Europe. They exist in the US. They exist also in Africa. And I think it's about knowing where the obstacles will lie and how you need to manage them. And in Africa, there are always, middlemen who try to get involved in the business that you're doing there. Some might call it could be perceived as corruption, or it could be perceived as the way things are done, the culture of how business is done. But honestly, I have to say that I wouldn't rank corruption for someone like me doing business in a small to medium size. I wouldn't rank corruption as one of the major things we've encountered or major blockers. I think it's just about knowing what to expect and knowing how to deal with the situations when you're presented with them.
Mm-hmm. Miro?
Yeah.
What is your experience?
My experience, well, I have numerous experiences with that. Personally, I have encountered people that tried to con me. I would say that it's more frequent than corruption, but it was kind of on a line of a corruption, and it was a person that was trying to use his position to secure some business for me, but at the same time trying to con me. So it was, but I knew what to, yeah, I knew what to look for. So this is the thing. Not everybody in Africa is corrupt, but you have to know how the business is done to be able to see when you are being conned, when somebody tries to, um, involve you in any sort of corruption or anything like that. And what is beautiful about it is that it's avoidable. You can avoid it. So if you just stick to your principles and don't get lured into fantasies and scenarios that might look too good to be true, then you're fine. But I mean, they talk about the sorry, it was breaking. What I wanted to say is that you
Yeah,
hear about
sorry.
corruption. You hear about corruption happening on a government level, municipalities, big companies, big industries, and so forth, all around Africa. However, we kind of had this perception that, yeah, that's happening in Africa, but it's not happening where we are. It's not happening in Europe, not in the UK, not in the US. Well, what happened? Panama Papers have been leaked, and all of a sudden, corruption goes all the way to the highest levels of the highest officials everywhere. So, I don't think corruption is something that is a problem of Africa. I think it's problem of human nature.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. That's when it comes to dealing with people, it varies from person to person, right? It really depends who are you talking to, who are you engaging with. So it's a matter of human nature, as you said. But it's really interesting to observe that the general processes when it comes to technology are in many occasions even much more developed in Africa than in some European countries. For example, we have been problem with setting up the the proper digitalization digital structure here in Slovakia. Politicians have been discussing it for 20 years in here, and it's still ongoing process. So this is very much interesting to see. Donna, as you said, that the Africans or African countries are very quick to pick up the recent developments and recent technical advantages, right?
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting that it's not just, digitalization of enterprise, like banks and financial services and these things. Actually, the governments in many African countries are digitizing and bringing in e-government systems at a really rapid pace. And these are systems that are as advanced or even more advanced than in some really good examples in Europe. We've recently worked on a project in Guinea, which is an e-voting election project. And we've done this similar type of technology in probably 4 or 5 countries in Africa in the last 5 or 6 years. And this is something that most countries in Europe don't have. So you register to vote, you use your biometrics, your face and your fingerprint. And then when you come there on the day to actually cast your vote, your biometric is compared with the one on record to make sure that you're the right person. So it leaves much less margin for fraud or for corruption in the election process. And I think in the area of voting or elections in general, many African countries are much far ahead of Europe. Or if you look at the US and how they've had their elections, they use a system which is probably more appropriate to 1921 rather than 2021. So Africa is leading the way in some of these areas.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so until now we have been talking about the positive aspects of Africa. Maybe we could also talk about the fact that there are still vast differences between social groups, and uneven opportunities leave the most vulnerable ones at the edge of social stratification. So was that the motivation for you, Donald, to create this or co-found the Uroda project in Uganda?
Yeah, I suppose it was. Before myself and Martin founded Eroda, I kind of had in my head that I wanted to get involved and start something with a social impact, and that I wanted to do it more than likely in Africa. The reason for that was that our company has had a lot of commercial success there over the years, and I felt it right to give back there. But as we said, you can't avoid the fact that there's more poverty in Africa than there is anywhere else in the world. That's simply a fact. And you're right, there's a huge gap between, even if you go to a big city like Kampala or Nairobi, you can have, very, very sophisticated restaurants and bars and a very nice, let's say, middle to upper class scene. But that just masks that there is really a lot of poverty when you move out of these big cities, or even in these big cities. So the idea to start Eroda, it came from just sort of social chats with Martin. Martin's obviously Ugandan, and I was discussing that I was thinking of doing something, and he came up with some ideas. What we founded now and what we're doing right now certainly wasn't the idea at the beginning. It's just something that kind of naturally took its course over time. Started with the idea of basically having a ginger farm in Uganda. We knew that the ginger as a crop is a quite interesting one. It's something there's a lot of demand for, and Ugandan land is extremely fertile and is available at a good price. So we decided to do that. But from there, and probably from when I visited there in December, we realized that we can do a lot more than just produce ginger and sell it to whatever markets happen to be available. We really saw in the area where we're actually producing our ginger, there's a lot of poverty. Miro mentioned stereotypes of people living in mud huts, but this is actually the reality in these places where we have our land. There's thousands of people living in very basic dwellings without electricity, without water, without sewage systems. So we decided that this Eroda project should be for the benefit of those people. So going there and seeing how they lived, we decided that there were a couple of areas we could focus on first. The first one we've managed to actually almost complete. We're just waiting on the final part, which is we've dug a water borehole on our land. So it's 90 meters down, and it's got a solar pump and a huge 10,000 liter tank attached to it. Of course, we'll use some of that water for our land, but the area itself is quite a wet area with lots of rain. So we've decided that the water that we have will be used to pump to the local, let's say, community points where the highest concentration of people live. And the difference that will make to people is that they won't have to send their 6 or 7-year-old kid on a 5-kilometer, 10-kilometer round trip to pick up water and carry it back in a heavy container. This is the first thing. And the second thing is we've now started, this week, we'll start building our biogas toilet facility, which is the first of its kind in the area. And this is going to be initially a couple of blocks of toilets, and hopefully we'll build it into something more. So a biogas toilet uses bacteria to turn human waste into cooking gas and clean water. So we thought that by these two starting points, we could start to build a community project. The long-term goal is that with the money we raise from selling our crop, we'll be able to buy more land, and then we want to lease that land back free of charge to the people who have worked on our project or become involved in our project, so that they and their families can take care of the land, that they can produce the crops, and then we ensure they get a fair price for it at the end.
That's very interesting. I was wondering, I watched a document about this project that was developed and fully funded and supported by Bill Gates. It was also something very similar to what you just described about this bio toilet. Is that the mechanism is that the similar mechanism to what he was describing, or is it completely something different?
Actually, it's the exact same. So I know a little bit about Bill Gates' project. It's in a couple of different places, and their goal is to deliver clean drinking water and cooking gas to communities by using these toilets for processing human waste. I think a lot of the research and development that's been led by Bill Gates and the Bill Gates Foundation probably led to us being able to source and buy these toilets at a relatively fair or low price. Probably if he hadn't been involved in this or hadn't been promoting this on the global stage, this technology or these toilets would still be quite a bit behind and quite expensive and difficult to source. So I think it's the exact same concept. Of course, we're doing it on a much smaller scale for now, and we'll see if we can replicate this in other parts of Uganda and also beyond, hopefully.
Good luck with that. Sekong is asking another question, which is, could you comment on racism in Africa against the whites in the countries you've been? And if you had any form of discriminations, be it positive or negative, that you could share with us. Donald mentioned it was easier for him to register his organization in Uganda, and I don't think that it was that is what most Ugandans, Tanzanians, Kenyans, Nigerians, and other Africans could attest to that. Okay, so maybe it was not because of a technical development there, or the processes are simply more stabilized and everything is going smoother, but possibly because you approach them as a Western European male, also can be. So what is your take on that?
No, I probably disagree with that, and the simple reason is that it was actually Martin who drove this. Martin's a Ugandan, so he took care of the registration. All I needed to do was sign a few papers, but the website where we registered to form our business didn't know if I was black or white. So I think the process would be the same for everybody in this case. But I think Sekong does raise an interesting point about positive or negative discrimination against white people. And I had this interesting conversation with a friend in Uganda when I was there. We talk a lot in Europe and the US about the concept of white privilege, and rightly so. It's something that needs to be discussed and addressed. But I had to say honestly that I hadn't really felt as much white privilege anywhere as I had in Kampala. And I can give you an example. Martin and I, we frequently went to the local mall. Security is a little bit tighter there than in most parts of Kampala, so you need to go through a security scanner. They'll pat you down if you have any, if it beeps. And time again, without fail, when I approached the scanner, I didn't take my mobile phone out of my pocket. I didn't take my wallet out. I walked through, it beeped, and I was let go in. And if the same happened to Martin, who happens to be local, and he was treated totally differently. So this was something I really noticed, that let's say positive discrimination against white people is definitely there, and of course there's also negative discrimination against people based on their color. Maybe Miro used some examples of trying to be conned and these kind of things. People can see that if you're a white person in Africa, it probably means that you have a little bit more money than normal white people, or I don't know what the perception might be, but definitely you can be a target or potential victim for things like for fraud.
I can give also a few more examples, actually, quite recent ones. We have time for that, right?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So, as I was on the beach, and on the beach, like on the public side, you get people approaching you, like people hustling for money, trying to support themselves. They go to you, they say it kind of in Swahili, or in Sheng, they say promoti kaka brother. That means like, please promote me, brother from another mother, sort of that sort of thing. If you want something, or if you don't want anything, don't want anything, they just approach you, they try to sell, they try to get at anything, which is might be in European money, like maybe 50 cents, €1, anything like that. Now, there was a guest that was, I think he was African American, but literally he was black. He walked to the beach, no one approached him. No one went to that person, and he was the same guest in that resort as I was. But I was approached, and not approached once. I couldn't. I literally many times I didn't even walk on the beach because I didn't want to be bothered. So there was no like quiet moment when I wanted to just clear my head and walk on the beach. Actually, there was, but I had to do it like 7, 8 in the morning, because around 9, 10 they come out, and yeah, you're being kind of bothered all the time. Another thing is, back 2011, I went to the bank and I could see like a long queue. So naturally, used from UK, as a British love to queue for everything. So I just stand in the line. So the guy came to me like, please, no sir, no, don't. And I went directly to the counter, and no one said anything. So this was another kind of, in my favor, discrimination again. Now, so these things happen, and they happen a lot. But once you get used to it and you know how to deal with it, and also I think it doesn't happen everywhere. So there are places where you are treated the same way as any local would, and I think that's the way forward. I think everybody should be treated the same. um, I wouldn't call it white privilege, though. That's something I don't think that's what it is, because when you think about the history in Africa, so the way people used to live, and then well, actually all of Africa has become colony of some colonial power, and the Western life, with the religion, with everything that goes with it, was brought onto the people. So people learned to live, and they developed their own version of that culture that was kind of put upon them. And so then when they see you, it's like, maybe, I don't know, fifth, 10th, whatever generation, that sees the same white person from somewhere where they brought something in, and they keep bringing things. And you have NGOs, and you have people coming here, to open small hospitals and to help, and so forth. So I would say it's this perception. So it's not really the perception that, oh, you're a millionaire. It's a perception that you guys have it better, so let us also experience some of that. So yeah, I wouldn't call it white privilege at all. I don't think it has anything to do with my color. It has something to do with where I'm from, because also I have some friends that were born in Kenya. They lived in London their whole life. They maybe they went to study in secondary school to UK, and they stayed there. And then whenever they come here, the same thing is expected from them. So to
Okay.
support, to kind of, for you to bring something. So once an African gets to Europe, and I believe it must have been spoken about in Europe
Mm-hmm. Miro, I think we lost you for a second. Let's see if he comes back. In the meantime, I would, are you there? Mhm. Sorry,
Yes, I'm back.
we
I'm back.
lost you for a second. Okay, it was not very clear what you were saying, but from what I understood is basically what you were trying to say here is that we as Europeans or Western countries, yeah, uh, apologies, guys. I think we're having problem with internet at this moment. Nevertheless, in the meantime, I'm gonna read question from Bobby Blankson, who is saying Donald is right on point. The issue of white privilege is highly prevalent in all of Africa. However, in Nigeria, it is not so obvious. And like Miro said, it also depends on the place and time. Thank you for your comment, Bobby. Miro, are we having you back?
Yes, I'm back. Sorry for that.
Could you please repeat the last part what you were saying because we didn't hear that part.
Yeah, last part from where? What was the last thing you heard?
That it's a matter of where you come from, not a matter of color. That you were saying that you had friends who are black
Yes.
from Europe,
Oh yeah, and the same thing. Yeah.
right?
So basically, the when they visit, people look at them like, oh, you live in Europe, you must be loaded now. So yeah,
Mhm.
what did you bring for me? Oh, promote me, support me, give me something. Yeah, and that I've seen as well. So I don't think it's always the matter of color.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what you're saying is that we as Europeans or Western countries contributed to the fact that, that, if I may say so, that many African countries got comfortable with the fact that the support is coming from abroad, and therefore they're not striving, they're not, you know, doing so much in order to build up themselves for themselves. Maybe this is not a
Uh,
question for us,
mm, yeah,
Europeans, but
no, I don't
maybe.
think. Yeah, so I don't think that's even remotely close to the problem is that it's not possible to simplify matters like this one. So you
Mhm,
can't look in such simplistic way. You can't say that it's not every African that would discriminate in a positive or negative way just because of me not being a black African. So I think, yeah, I think it's it has different aspects, but it exists.
mhm,
That's all we can say. That's all we can be comfortable with.
Yeah, I think the
mhm,
points Miro made, it's it's a culmination of pretty much all of the history of the African continent now being manifested in modern society. So it's really difficult to wrap it up in a couple of
Yeah,
lines as to what it
and
actually
it keeps
is.
changing, and it keeps
Exactly.
changing.
mhm.
So yeah.
Okay. Before we end up our conversation, I would like to ask you guys one more question, which is what could be an inspiration for Slovakia and other European countries from Africa, and vice versa? What Africans could observe in us could be beneficial for them?
Well, I think the openness and how people treat each other is something that Europe can take as inspiration from Africa, and also peace and reconciliation. I'm from Ireland, and obviously Ireland has had its problems over the years with the North and South and the Troubles, and many people lost their lives. And those wounds still run deep in Ireland. The people haven't forgotten, and the divide is still there. And when I went to, in this case, Rwanda, obviously people know that Rwanda had a terrible genocide in the 90s, where 1 million people were killed in 100 days. The colonizers actually had divided them into artificial groups of Hutu and Tutsi, labeled them, and created this anxiety between them, and there was a huge war and genocide there. And I visited the genocide memorial in Kigali, and what really struck me was that they have gotten over that. The people who were on one side or the other of that terrible event, they still live together. They live in the same streets and the same buildings. They don't talk about the genocide anymore. They've grown to forgive their neighbors and what they've done against their families, and they get on with life. In fact, they don't. If you make a faux pas and you ask a person in Rwanda if they are part of the Hutu or Tutsi tribe, their response is universally, "We're all Rwandans." That's it. So I think the fact that they've gone through something which was absolutely terrible and one of the worst genocide events in human history in such a short time frame, and within 20 or 30 years of that, they're living together as one nation. That's massively inspiring for me as a European, and especially as an Irish European.
Cool. What about you, Miro? What do you think we could take from Africans?
I would say, you know, the simplest things, like we should appreciate more what we have in terms of infrastructure, in terms of opportunities and possibilities, in terms of how organized our society is in comparison. And I think that's what we should. I'm actually thinking what Africa could take from Europe, or actually what Kenya, because I'm more closer to Kenya, and what would be something that is relevant. And that first thing that comes to my mind is that that I can't think of anything, because I'm not looking at it from a perspective of an African. I think this is really a question that should be asked from Sakong, from anyone who is, you know, who is from Africa and lives and experiences the different culture. And
Okay, then.
yeah, because we are all biased in this, and I think my bias doesn't allow me to actually think that way.
Okay, then let's stick to the first part of the question. What could we take from Africans? What could be beneficial to us to learn or to know?
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. To appreciate the little things, to be more happy, to not to be whining about things that are good. You know, I mean, when I lived in Bratislava, I mean, my neighbors used to complain about crazy things that don't matter. You know, so yeah. I mean, be happy. You have a good life. You have clean water. You have food. You have opportunities. You have jobs. If you don't have a job, you get an unemployment benefit. Well, good luck if you live in Africa and you get unemployed.
Yeah, I totally agree with Miro. I think it's certainly not our place to say what Africa should learn from Europeans, and I also think that Europeans have a lot more to learn from Africa than Africa does from Europe. But I think the people like myself and Miro and ASU and people who are in a position to help should be willing to help. And when there's an opportunity somewhere that you see that you can make an impact, then of course be proactive in doing that. But I don't think the tone of dictating to Africans what they should learn from us is really the right way to go. It's more about if there's a way you can help, then be open to doing so.
Guys, thank you so much. These lovely and inspiring words, we're wrapping up our conversation. It was very inspiring and interesting for me personally to listen to you guys. I hope it was equally enriching experience for our audiences. And of course, just to let you know, for those ones who join us a little later, we are here for you guys every month on a regular basis. We are welcoming different speakers. We're talking about very interesting different topics. So be ready for our next conversation in February. So thank you for watching. Stay healthy, stay safe. Until the next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.